Welcome back to TEYARA SMP, a TNP Limitless 7 series, and unfortunately this episode has kind of gotten away from me this week. It's going to be more of a progress report than anything else, so the reason for that is, in my inventory we have some upgrades and stuff that I've crafted up, as well as a couple of changes that we've made up here. And the thing is, we're going to start working on the mystical agriculture building that's going to be down in this general direction somewhere through the wall. And in doing that, I started working on autocrafting for a whole bunch of stuff. So you can see that we've got a ton of components that we use and create in here. I've also added a few recipes for like stone and kelp. And I've also automated sawmill wood, and we also we've added some stuff to the induction smelter for alloying. And if we come over to the requester terminal, we have cleared out the recipes that were recursive in nature, and we can solve those down the road when we actually do need to be bulk crafting smithing templates. But for now, I've just been manually crafting the netherite smithing upgrades, so that's been fine. We added minimum stock for both spruce planks and stone, and that's only going to get better as we add storage networks to our system, or storage drawers to our system. So up top we still have that storage controller that we were talking about earlier that's going to govern the house probably, but then we also have the controller access point. And let's see, we also added this cell workbench because they're related. You see, when I started making these, the upgrades for functional storage, I ran into a bit of a snag. It caused the server to crash, and I figured out, after a number of resets and restoring from backup, that the reason that is true is because of these. These had the highest priority on the system. And so what would happen is, it would start to craft the upgrade, and then it would try to insert it into these range upgrades. At least I think. Because we don't actually have any storage hooked up to either of these controllers or access points. Okay, and we can't actually put anything into the access point either, that's good to know. But, because this right here doesn't really count as an inventory, and there isn't an actual inventory hooked up to this, it tried to insert into this storage controller. Which, as you can imagine, was a bad thing. It wasn't expecting to be able to do that in Java code, and the server just crashed. And it wasn't until I made some copper ones manually in this crafting terminal, had them in my hand, and then decided to put them back in here when it caused the crash, that I realized, no, it's not auto-crafting that's broken, it's my setup. And so the way I rectified that is by making this cell workbench, making an extra drive bay with a couple of storage cells in it. Now the leftmost one has all of the upgrades that we're going to use for sophisticated storage, functional storage, my bad, and the one on the right has all of the sophisticated storage upgrades. And I figured we'd do this in advance, just in case we end up trying to autocraft upgrades for barrels as well. So theoretically, in the future, we shouldn't worry about that sort of crash going on, but because we put this drive bay in here and we set the priority to the highest, with these partitioned cells, they will only ever accept the upgrades for the storage that we're currently using in this system. And that's pretty much how we're going to have to approach things. In the future, we might be able to do a subnet that crafts these things, and then only has a storage bay so that you never worry about getting this sort of situation. But then we can have our main system, which may have a mixture of storage items, use that subnet as the storage for these upgrades, so we can still potentially autocraft them and the like, but they're just stored in a place that they can't accidentally interact with mods in a bad way. So if you're combining functional storage with applied energistics, or possibly even refined storage, just keep that in mind when you're doing your autocrafting. Just don't mix the upgrades. So anyway, that took several hours of my life. The other thing that I was vaguely aware of, but finally figured out a fix to, is in the basement. So over here, sometimes this will end up spinning in a strange way. Typically, I think, because the server shuts down when the system is on. And Create doesn't like that very much. So what I figured out that I can do is we can probably put a ComputerCraft computer next to this redstone breaker. Actually, probably over on this side, might make sure that it doesn't clip through the wire. But we'll put a ComputerCraft computer next to this, and then we'll code it up such that we get the real time that my server usually reboots at. We're going to have to specify this probably in milliseconds since epoch or something like that. Or is it epoch or epic? Either way, we're going to have to get milliseconds for those restart times, and then we'll say, hey, probably not a full 20 minutes, but like 15 minutes before that, just turn the ComputerCraft computer's redstone on so that the redstone breaker doesn't turn on the last time before the reset. And so what that'll do is, even though this will turn off, the breaker will still be on, and that won't transmit power back to the auto starter. So then power will start to drain out of the capacitor here, but theoretically we have enough for at least one in-game day of no power generation, theoretically, especially if nothing is auto-crafting upstairs. So we can just kind of let this bleed out, and then this one, which is our actual starter charge, this one won't run out because it's not hooked up in a drain way, at least going upwards towards the attic. It can only drain out this way, and we don't usually turn this on. But by cutting the breaker, again, using the ComputerCraft computer, we can say, hey, 15 minutes before the server is about to restart, just don't turn back on for a little bit. And then the neat thing is the server restart will cause the ComputerCraft computer to reboot itself. And so then basically we can just say something to the effect of, on reboot, clear any redstone signal that you're emitting. And so then if it's sunny and the computer turns off, the breaker will open back up and that'll start up the motor again, and then this will all start itself back up. Now, again, we're probably still going to need to look up the epoch time for at least the first, I think it's Mondays and Thursdays that I restart the server. So we're going to need to look up a timestamp for both of those, the initial one after I've coded everything. And then the way that I'll architect the code is such that when it realizes it's within 15 minutes of one of those timestamps, it will then turn on the redstone signal and then update a file within itself to say what the next set of timestamps is supposed to be. And so then that way we don't need to concern ourselves with the timestamps anytime after that, as long as we get it right the first time. It'll just be self-updating, and we should be able to avoid any more issues where this breaks itself, hopefully. And even if this spine drains out, as I said, we'll have a little bit of backup buffer in this accumulator here, so that way, even if the upstairs drains, then this will still restart itself after the night is over, and by the time I've logged on the server, we'll have power upstairs again, and we'll be back to auto-crafting and everything's perfectly normal. Now, around that time, I also noticed some serious performance hits, and eventually I found out that there's a tool called Observable in this pack, and I've bound the key to F4, which I also sometimes use for FreeCam in the version that I've installed FreeCam as an add-on, just so that we can do some camera work. But if I press F4, you can see that we can take a TPS profile, and if we just go ahead and click that, after the specified amount of time elapses, you will then start to see this kind of an overlay in the overworld. And everywhere that it's green means that it's a nominal performance hit. Like, there's barely any delay. Of course, storage drawers, they don't really tick frequently, so that's why you see them as 0 or 1 microsecond. But if we take a look over here, Create, specifically the smart chutes, seem to have some performance issues. And I don't know why, but it seems like it's very specific ones. So maybe if I put some filtering on it, that might potentially help. But those were not the biggest causes of lag. Unfortunately, well, it was all the bees that had been around here. And as you can see, there are very conspicuously no bees. They're very absent right now. So originally what I'd really wanted to do was put down a few beehives around here with a system that would automatically replenish the beehives and then, I don't know, I guess like either break them when they're full and then export them to some storage system where I could have theoretically near infinite amounts, or just break the beehive with the bees in it and then throw it in a garbage can immediately, just to void it out of the system. But the performance was so bad. Like, if all of this is measured in microseconds, the bees themselves contributed to a literal 0.04 seconds of performance delay on the server. And that's not even with me, like, being over here. Like, yes, that made that problem worse, but just because this area is chunk loaded, it was generating so very many bees. So before I turn the overlay off, I have hidden a cheeky repeating command block. And what this command block does is it just gets rid of bees within 64 blocks. I don't know if that's too wide a radius. I definitely went through and got rid of the bees that had flown over there. Not all of them. There is a village over there with actual beehives, so I left a few. But we got rid of the massive swarm, and like I said, that was 40,000 microseconds of lag, and that's 0.04 seconds. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but when it comes to server delay, that's pretty freaking massive. So we did away with the bees. I put the repeater command block in there, and it looks like we don't have any more swarm. Oh, yeah, and if I look over my head, I am the biggest cause of, well, performance right here. But that makes sense. I'm the player. I'm an entity that can kind of just do whatever. And like even NPCs don't take that much of a performance hit because it's not constantly trying to pull them, I don't think, but it is pulling me as the player, so I'm even doing more lag than the smart shoot here. Anyway, I'm rambling. Now, lastly, I am going to lay down a bit of the framework of what I have in mind down below. We're not going to be able to do everything this week because, as I said, I've taken a lot of time just getting to this point. But we are going to build something like a mechanically augmented greenhouse. And so what's going to be the center point of that greenhouse is we need to take a look at the coordinates of this controller access point. So we're just going to determine that by finding what block we're currently on. So this is 2044, or negative 2044, I should say. And then it's going to be at negative 2005. And once we put in all of the netherite upgrades to this storage controller, I believe I've determined that it has a radius in blocks of 44, as opposed to, hold on, let's see, yeah, increases controller radius by 8 blocks, so 4 by 8 is 32, and then I guess this is a default radius of 12, so that is a cube with 89 blocks on a side, if I'm remembering this correctly, centered on a storage controller. So we just need to take negative 2044 and 2005 and just add 44 to that to get some actual coordinates that we're going to be using. And we already vaguely know where that is. I've been there before. So negative 2044 is easy. That's just negative 2000 straight up. And then negative 2005 is going to be 2001 minus 40, so negative 1961. We've already passed it in the X direction. Okay, so that's 2000. And we need to go to 1961. That's right here. Now the problem is I didn't take a look at the vertical direction. And let me also think this through a little bit. We are going to put our elevator pulley, which I didn't bring with me because I don't have any brass casing. Okay, so this will stand in for our elevator pulley right now. We need to get rid of this tree real quick, just so I can do some easier work here. So theoretically, our storage controller is going to go here. And I'm just going to go ahead and put the storage upgrades into it. just so we can tell what the range is on this thing. And if I take out my linking tool, I think I just need to click on this. And now we have a bounding box that we can take over to here. Oh yeah, we've got plenty of space on the Y value. So it only really matters that I have the X values correct. So if we just take out the linking tool, it should still be bound, and we should see a slice like, yes. I think it just comes into this controller access point. And I think if I right-click, what mode are we in? Okay, so we're in single binding mode. I'm just going to right-click this. Yes! And we have there just linked this controller access point to the controller that's way over there. So that's great. That does mean that we're going to be able to link that system up to this storage network at a distance. And then we're going to do some more stuff with applied energistics over there, but the main goal is to... Let me just head back over there real quick. Yeah, so potentially we can even lower this a little bit because it is kind of raised. We are going to need to flatten some of the land here in order to get what I'm thinking of building. But this, from an X and Z perspective, is already the correct center. It can only ever shift up and down in the Y axis. And so then what we're going to do once we're able to do this is... Do I have windmill bearing? Oh, I only have one windmill bearing and then I need a second one. Well, imagine with me for a second, friends. Let me just hop up to a good place. And let me also put this bounding box away. So, we're going to have something that I'm hoping looks a bit like... I think it's called the Glass Palace. I'm thinking of that building that I believe was in the World's Fair. And we're just going to build like that sort of a structure as kind of a greenhouse. It might also be like there might be a train station that's kind of similar to what I'm thinking of, but it's going to be sort of long in this direction here, and we're going to have a whole bunch of storage on the ground level. But then in the middle here, we're going to have a bit of a T where the building does still have like its sort of arched window structure. It's just going to like make sort of a small cross almost. But then in that cross, like in this central area, we're going to have an elevator, which is why I talked about elevator pulleys, and I'm disappointed that I haven't made one yet. But there's going to be an elevator pulley directly under this storage controller. That's why the andesite casing is there. And we are going to... Oh, it occurs to me that the orientation on this might need to change, but that's fine. We can always just relink it, probably. But we're going to have the elevator pulley here. We are going to have a couple of... I want to say we're going to use encased belts, which you can just use by making a create belt, and then extending it up to your target, and then encasing it with the andesite casing, much like you can do with shafts. And then we are going to hide, well, not even really hide, but we're going to use windmill bearings in a very atypical fashion like we have been the rest of this series, and we're going to make almost sort of a vertical or horizontal wind turbine in the ceiling as part of the spine of this very glass structure. And the other thing that I want to do is the elevator that's going to be here might be just sort of vaguely clover relief shaped or some other kind of thing that has 4 points on it or whatever. And as we descend down into the basement of this thing, we're going to have rows of storage all along the edges. And so it's going to be like this deep storage silo. Well, not that deep. We can only go down a maximum of 44 blocks from here. But we're going to have a storage silo that's going to encompass all of mystical agriculture. And I'm trying to think what else we're going to have. Probably just a few regular crops that we're already growing. I don't think it's going to be an entirely comprehensive list. And then I haven't exactly decided how it's going to be implemented precisely, but there's also going to be like sort of a dome in the central area here, and we're going to have some stairs that'll wind up to that dome, and we'll probably put our mystical agriculture altar and stuff up there so that we can make all of the seeds that we need to up in here. And then we just go down into the storage in the basement layers or whatever, and we can put all of our mystical agriculture stuff down there. We'll have some applied energistics as not even exactly a subnetwork. It's going to be its own network that's hooked up to this storage controller, which will then just process everything else down here. So like mystical agriculture, everything is an essence, and we're going to be using that applied energistic system to process it all into actual blocks. So then the system over there is going to be able to see not only the essences, but also all of the materials that we've made down here, and we're going to be using a ton of compacting drawers so that we don't even need to go through every single phase of matter, or conversion, technically speaking. So if we have gold, we'll have gold nuggets, we'll have gold blocks, etc., etc., with all the different materials that we can make from mystical agriculture. So unfortunately, as I said, we don't have a lot tangibly done this week, but I certainly learned a lot. I hope you guys did as well. If you did like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified. And as always, I'm looking forward to your feedback in the comments below. And with that, I will catch you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody. In the upper left is the next video in the series, or a video you might like. In the lower left is the series playlist, and on the right is my icon, by which you can subscribe. Thanks again for watching.